Well, let's go ahead and get rolling. So welcome everyone to the Trifecta of Carbon Commitments. We're so excited to have you here. We have a great presentation in store. I'm Ellen Shepard. I'm an outreach manager with Energy Trust New Buildings, and I'm also on the AIA COTE board, and I coordinate the digital design series for the board. So just a couple reminders here about technology. We're going to keep ourselves muted, and you're welcome to put your camera in speaker view. And just to let you know, we are recording the presentation. Next. So we do have some community agreements. These are the same ones that you've seen before if you've participated in our digital design series. Just definitely ask that you try to be present and that you kind of honor the group wisdom and curiosity, and also use inclusive language if you would like to participate in the chat. All right, next. So this does have continuing education credits, and here's the information. We're happy to share this with you again later if you need it. Next. There are learning objectives, and these are the ones that are part of this session. We're not going to go over them specifically right now, but we're happy to share them again later if you'd like to see those. Next. And then we did just want to let you know, hot off the press, we have the Green Champion Summit that kicks off Sustainable Building Week. That's going to be coming on Monday, October 9th from 4 to 5:30. The registration will be live this Friday. So definitely mark your calendars. We'd love to have you participate. It's going to be at Sarah Architects in their beautiful new space. Next. All right, and this is sponsored by Energy Trust, and we're happy to be a part of this event. Energy Trust is an independent nonprofit, and really the goal is to provide clean, affordable energy for everyone, including these little cuties here in the picture. Next. We serve, I think the number's a little higher now. It's just under 2 million customers of Portland General Electric, Pacific Power, Northwest Natural, Cascade Natural, and Avista Natural Gas. And really our goal is to build a stronger Oregon and Southwest Washington and help connect everyone with affordable energy and renewable power. So with that, I am going to hand us over to Naomi Cole. So thank you, Naomi.
Great, thanks, Ellen. So my name is Naomi Cole. I have a small business called Construct, and I work with Energy Trust New Buildings to support 2 grant offers that they have, net zero grant offers, which I will talk about in a moment, and both support these national carbon initiatives that we're here to talk about today. So I will stop sharing slides in just a minute, but wanted to give you all a little introduction before we have a conversation with 3 individuals that are representing firms that have signed on to each of these commitments. So the goal for today is to inform folks about these 3 initiatives and what it really takes to deliver on them. And we recognize that not all 3 of these are super well known in the design community yet, which is part of why we wanted to have this conversation. So the AIA 2030 commitment is the best known. It's been around for over a decade. Probably a lot of architects on the call know this well. Your firm may be a signatory. There's, I think, just over 40 Oregon signatories. And there's 2 newer engineering challenges that are also in the market that are a call to the design community to achieve net zero emissions. And so the other 2 are SE 2050, which is led by the Structural Engineering Institute, so Structural Engineering 2050, and the MEP 2040 commitment, which is for mechanical, electrical, and plumbing engineers, and that is led by the Carbon Leadership Forum. And collectively, these commitments are trying to bring the building industry towards net zero carbon, recognizing that to achieve these targets, we've got to start designing net zero buildings today because of the timeline to design, build, and operate, a lot of the large scale commercial buildings that many of you work on. So these 3 commitments have some things in common, and the sort of industry as a whole is trying to find more alignment across the 3 of them, which is part of why we are having this conversation and supporting them through Energy Trust program. So they all require firms to sign on as commitment signatories. They all require some type of plan, and they all require annual reporting. So there's a lot of similarities in terms of the way they're structured, and I think it's possible over the next few years we'll find even more similarities as the sort of leaders of each of these initiatives are trying to build them together, bring them together, because ultimately the data is for the same buildings, just from the perspective of a different member of the design team. So I do want to plug Energy Trust grant programs, especially one that is currently open, because this is directly in support of these three commitments. So the Net Zero Emerging Leaders Internship Grant is a pretty cool little funding opportunity that Energy Trust offers every year to support firms who are signatories of one of these three commitments to hire an intern to help them, to provide a little extra capacity and help them do their reporting every year. And so this application is open now. It is due next Friday. And Kriya here is going to put a link to the application in the chat. And it's a very simple application. So even though it's due next week, that should not deter you. But the firms must be commitment signatories by the application deadline. And the firms are able to hire an intern to conduct this work in the first quarter of the year. We offer this annually, and the timeline aligns roughly with the grant reporting deadlines, which is why it's in Q1. So take a look at that. If you have any questions, you can email me as well. I will put my contact info in the chat. And one of the great things about it is that we create a little cohort of mentors from the firms and the hired interns who meet a couple times and work through some of the reporting requirements. And firms can apply if they're brand new to reporting or if they've been at this for a while. And even if they've already participated in the program, you're welcome to apply, particularly if the internship scope is to take your reporting to the next level. Say you've been looking at operational emissions, but now you're going to start looking at embodied carbon, although we do give preference to first-time applicants or first-time grantees. And then the last, just a quick plug, because the application is closed, but we also have, Energy Trust has a Net Zero Fellowship Grant, which awards research funds to practitioners, architects, engineers, developers, contractors, to address a key barrier in the industry to help advance net zero design. And this application just closed, but we have the results of research from previous fellows available on our website. I think there's 9 different research projects that are still super timely and relevant. So with that, I will stop sharing, and I'm going to introduce our 3 panelists. So I have a few sort of prompts to get us started, and then we're going to open it up for a conversation and invite all of you to put questions in the chat, and we'll go from there. So with that, so we've got 3 people representing each of these 3 commitments. So we've got Kelly Kimura from Opsis Architecture, if you want to kind of wave, Kelly. We've got Jessica Martinez from DCI Engineering, representing SE 2050, and we've got Ante Volin from GluMac Engineering, representing MEP 2050. So I'm going to let each of them start by introducing themselves and their role and their firm, and a little bit about the firm's history with this commitment to date. So Kelly, why don't you go ahead and get started?
Yeah, thanks so much. So my name is Kelly Kimura. I am a sustainability coordinator at Opsis Architecture. So we're about a 60-person firm in Portland, located in Northwest, probably close to a lot of the other firms out here. So I guess a little bit of background about Opsis's signatory or signing on to the 2030 commitment. We signed on in 2013, which was a little bit before my time at the firm. I believe the first year we completed like a full all project report was in 2015. And I think just going into a little bit about like sustainability at Opsis really aligned with what the 2030 commitment and 2030 challenge are all about. So that being a core value, I think aligned with some of the requirements for being a signatory, such as like putting together a sustainability action plan and sharing that as part of sort of your onboarding, as well as just being a part, I think, of the larger community and supporting like the transparency of how all of our projects are doing and working towards common goal. So should I pass it to Jessica?
Yeah, great, thanks.
Thanks, Kelly, and thanks, Naomi. My name is Jessica Martinez. I am a sustainability specialist at DCI Engineers. For some quick background, I officially, I guess, transferred over from doing structural engineering to full-time sustainability at DCI about 2 years ago. So I have a largely structural background. It's been really exciting to be with DCI throughout its sustainability journey. I remember back in 2017 when we formed our internal sustainability committee, how excited everyone was to really start digging into this world and seeing exactly what we can do as structural engineers. I guess we've largely kind of felt out of the conversation several times in the past surrounding sustainability. And so with the SE 2050 commitment and its emergence in the industry, we really had a great opportunity to start to insert ourselves more often and really bring our expertise to the table. And so now, as being the sustainability specialist at DCI, I very much lead our internal staff education, research, and development of resources. We have, let's see, about 400 plus employees spread over 20 plus offices now. So it's a pretty large undertaking to really get everybody on the same page. Let me see, where do we go from here? I guess we signed on to the SE 2050 commitment back in March 2021. And this was done through submitting a letter from our executive management team. We got our CEO, CFO, COO, and all three of our vice presidents to commit and agree that this was in line with our goals as a company. And I do want to just kind of say we're a fairly large firm at the time that we committed to this as well, and so it took us a little bit of time to really make sure that we were going to be able to deliver on this process or on this promise and really bake sustainability into everything we do. So currently we have submitted 2 years of our embodied carbon action plans, as well as reported data to the database. Actually gave our company-wide yearly embodied carbon presentation today at lunch. So coming off of that great win. And yeah, we're looking forward to issuing our next embodied carbon action plan in the spring. And yeah, excited to be a part of this conversation.
Great. Thanks, Jessica. Ante?
Mm-hmm.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Ante Volin with GluMac. Some of you may be familiar with GluMac as an MEP design engineering firm that also does commissioning, technology, lighting design, energy analysis, and sustainability certification work. And what brings all those services together is this commitment to green buildings that work. GluMac really prides itself on sustainable design, and my role in that is heavily focused on embodied carbon analysis, climate action planning, and sustainable certification management. And so in that context, those values, MEP 2040, when it first came out, just instantly aligned. And so really the decision to get on board from leadership was very easy. They wanted to know if there were any hidden tricks or anything going on. But for the most part, it was a very fast decision to get on board once it was understood. And then in that time, since late 2021, it's been a lot of learning about, okay, how do we actually build this momentum? We're clear on where we want to go, but what are the organizational decisions we need to make? What does our plan really look like? We're still crafting that plan. It's in its final stages, I think, but it's taken a lot of stakeholder engagement internally to get everyone on the same page. But it's exciting. It's been nice to have something we can point to, both externally and then internally to our own staff about, how seriously are we about climate-focused solutions.
Great, thank you. And I should also mention, I said there were a little over 40 AIA 2030 signatories in Oregon. And of course, it's hard to get the numbers exactly right because many of these firms work nationally and they have offices in multiple states. And I think there's like 6 or 7 MEP 2040 signatories, at least last I had heard from Ante, and there's like 10, 11 SE 2050, again, depending on like where the firms count their headquartered office and some work that we were trying to do. So that gives you a sense for these two newer commitments of kind of number of firms in Oregon. And so given this is, you know, an AIA event, there's a lot of architects on the line. Talk to your engineers about these commitments and make sure that they know, because you're likely already working with them to do the analysis. So, so that's great. So with that context, I'd love to know from all of you how signing on to this commitment and the requirements of the commitment have changed the way you design and that your firm's starting to think about design. And jump in as you're ready.
Yeah, I can jump in first. I would say, I think it really helped us with like prioritizing very early design conversations, whether that be with the design team or the owners group, and just like very clear goal setting, I think, is always really key. So making sure that we like know what our energy use intensity EUI goal is. Because for 2030 challenge, we're wanting to reduce that from like the baseline, which is CBEX 2003 data. And I just wanted to also, I think, shout out like the ETO for their early design meetings, because that's also a really great space to like bring the whole team to the table and be like, okay, this is where we're currently at with our proposed EUI, and this is where we want to be, and this is sort of where COTE is. But the 2030 challenge, often the reduction is much further past COTE, so it's nice to share that with like the team and the owners group and be like, okay, how do we get there? And what are the strategies that can be?
And Kelly, do you mind explaining CBEX for folks who might not know on the line who aren't doing
Oh
this work?
yeah, I'm really bad with the acronym CBEX, but it's like the commercial buildings database.
Energy consumption database.
Yeah, energy consumption database. Thank you. It's basically taking 2003 building data and sort of establishing baselines for various building types. And that's what the 2030 challenge and 2030 commitment reference for what we're trying to reduce our energy use by. So right now, I think every year there's like increment thresholds to reduce. And right now, I believe we're at 80% reduction from CBEX. Yeah.
I'll jump in and say, in some respects, at say our highest performing projects or our most demanding clients, nothing changed. I think a lot of stuff was already focused on getting it net zero or all electric design. And what we realized is that there's that other half, the bottom half, those projects that where maybe no one's pushing you to do the most sustainable design. And so how do you build up that kind of internal process where maybe ETO incentives aren't even on their radar or other kinds of things to get them moving forward. So I think one thing that happened in parallel was an internal commitment to be an all electric first design firm. So to bring that option up first when we're doing mechanical designs for buildings, so that the owner is aware that that is, you know, the path of the future. And being transparent about the opportunities and challenges. So that was something that our engineering department settled on that ultimately supports that, getting projects moving along this line. And so there's a lot of coordination between, you know, the thought leader part of the business who are pushing the business forward, and then the people who need to execute. And I think having to create the plan is really helping us get everyone build some nice momentum in that respect.
Yeah, and from the structural perspective, I mean, I guess I want to emphasize again how I guess over the past, you know, few decades, we really haven't really felt like we've had a seat at the table or really been invited to the sustainability conversation, just because, you know, structure is meant to keep the building standing up, and, you know, concrete usually doesn't off gas, and there's a lot of our materials are less, you know, health offensive on the installation side. Manufacturing is a completely different story, but you know, like I said, we just haven't really understood, I guess, our impact. And so with the SE 2050 commitment and really understanding the importance of our designs and understanding the, you know, the benefit of material savings has really added an extra dimension to the you know, puzzle that we're trying to put together as structural engineers. I found it's incredibly empowering and really helps push those engineers even farther to tell them just how much of a magnitude their everyday work really means. We've done several studies to where we kind of show this is what an average consumer is able to affect, and this is what structural engineers can do. And it really excites our firm, and it really excites all the engineers to go that extra mile and ask those extra questions, see exactly how we can continue to sharpen our pencils. Because like I said, in the past, once the building stands up, that's good. That's all we really need to do. But as we've started to introduce this this extra dimension into our problem solving process, it's been extremely exciting, very rewarding, and it really keeps us all going. So yeah, just continuing to be better and utilize our materials more effectively. So.
And so as a follow-up to that, I realize I should ask, since there's folks on the call that might not know these initiatives super well. So you each talk kind of at a high level how it's changing the way you think about your buildings, but maybe you could each talk a little bit about like the practicality of reporting and analysis and data collection, and how you've sort of built that into sort of standard practice, or if it's still sort of an add-on at the end, and maybe a little bit about how you're working with your consultants to make sure you're all getting good analysis and good data.
Sure, I can jump back in. So I dropped off. But yeah, it's been tricky, especially from my perspective, where we have such a large amount of employees and offices. We really want to make sure that we're doing this right and delivering on our promise. So we're essentially, making sure that we're providing our engineers the resources to make better decisions. So, updating our general notes, making sure that that is squared away, then educating the engineers on what those changes mean and how to discuss them with their project teams. So that's a big part, is educating and implementing more tangible reduction strategies for our commitment. We also are in the process of implementing a more automated reporting process. It's been interesting navigating the different software that's available at this time and figuring out what is the most efficient process for us, while also being as accurate as feasibly possible. So that, coupled with several other initiatives, implementing internal QCs and on sustainability and developing education paths, are all really, things that we're trying to do to make sure that we're following through and providing all the staff with as much information and assistance as possible.
And do you do that sort of modeling and analysis on a project by project basis, like when reportings do, or are you starting to build it into your processes for every building?
Historically, it's been project by project. We've done internal studies for research purposes, then we've done studies for clients that have requested it. And the ultimate goal will be that we're doing LCA on all of our jobs, and becoming more specific with those LCAs as the need arises. However, with our company being so large and our BIM department being largely separated from our engineering department, there is a lot of infrastructure that needs to go and planning that needs to go into that, and make sure that everything is moving smoothly. So it's a tough mountain to climb, but we're going to keep going.
Glad you're climbing it. Okay, Kelly?
Oh yeah, I can jump in and say, I think in terms of like process, and related to sort of like having an early conversation with your team and the client, I feel like whether it's like an ETO early design meeting or like a early sustainability shred, it's, I think, like establishing that we're going to have this event or meeting with the owner's team, the larger design team, and sort of coming to that meeting with our analysis in place, whether that's looking at like carbon very holistically for the whole project, or EUI reduction goals, or a really early life cycle assessment. That's always a really good push for us to be like prepared to come to the table and come with recommendations. So I would say that, and then maybe more in terms of like the reporting process itself. I think same as Jessica, it's like to report all your projects and do your best to keep on top of that reporting throughout the life of a project is a huge undertaking. I feel like it's been really nice to, I think, just realize and like have conversations with like our MEP partners and our structural engineer partners and be like what part of the analysis are you doing? Like, can we like have a conversation about this early on, whatever it might be? Because I think there's just so much overlap between the analyses we are doing too, whether it's like a early energy model or like life cycle assessment on the embodied carbon side. So yeah, I don't know, just opening it up to the larger design team has been like nice, and just like having space for a collaborative process has been cool. So
I will say one of the challenges with the reporting is sometimes what is a project, like if is it only a ground up building? Well, what about a major renovation or a minor renovation? What kind of projects are you trying to collect it? So I think having to go through that own definition for ourselves was an important step. And then where do you have actual model data? Where do you have real data about the energy a building is using? And when do you have to make an estimate? And how do you prioritize? Because I would say probably there's a strong bias that the projects where we have model data or real data are the best performing projects, because they're the people who are the most motivated. So you have a non-representative sample of what you're doing. And so that's a big challenge, because those are in some ways your favorite or your darling projects, but you really need to make sure you're moving that bottom one up. And if you don't have a model, so you don't know how much the energy they're using, it's tough. And in some places and in some other markets, right, where you have performance-based energy model compliance, that helps to at least help you kind of guess roughly where you're at on, say, a building in Seattle or a California building, which is good. But the big challenge that I think we're facing now is how do you do that kind of early integrated analysis, Kelly, but like without this, because sometimes the client doesn't know to ask for it, so it might not be explicitly in your scope. So how do you educate them that it's part of it, or find the fastest, easiest way to do it so that it gets done early on?
Yeah, I feel like maybe just one thing to add, it's been helpful to maybe just look at like the project's goals from everyone's perspective, if that makes sense. So it's like when we, whether the project's doing certification for like LEED or ILFI or not, that might be a goal, but then also looking at like the owner's goals and whatever sustainability plans they have, and then like overlaying all of our goals on top of that, like the 2030, 2040, 2050 commitment, like that might be I don't know if we've very like explicitly done that, but I'm just thinking like that'd be a nice one to just bring to the table for everyone.
Well, that's a great transition to my next question, which I will ask in a moment. And then I also want to encourage folks, I'll turn it over to you in a moment to the broader group. So if you have questions, please put them in the chat for these folks. They can be super big picture, super in the weeds, technical. We want this to be useful to all of you and guide you in your carbon commitment journey. So yeah, Kelly, as you were starting to dive into, I'm curious what you think we can do to find more alignment in the industry across these commitments from the perspective of your firms, but also I think particularly Ante and Jessica, you're working kind of regionally on these national initiatives, or maybe nationally. Sort of what's next to sort of bring these together more in the industry so that you know, we're designing better and that it's also a more efficient reporting process.
Well, I think there's a lot of collaboration going on already, which is really good. I mean, during reporting season, we get emails from architects saying, hey, we need numbers for our AI 2030 reporting. So it is happening. And then I think there's a lot of good collaboration just within the commitment peer groups themselves. I think that's one of the big advantages of joining, is getting connected to groups who aren't just your usual neighbors, but like people from all around the country who are doing the same issues. And people talk about, hey, how are we approaching, how we want to do our carbon calculations versus other people. Other groups like Carbon Leadership Forum that kind of overhang it are also great collaborative venues where for all of these people to interact. but there's just a big education factor, because I think engineers really want to nerd out on hourly carbon emissions, and some people aren't even ready to, they're still transitioning from kilowatt hours to pounds of carbon. They're not ready for that conversation, but it matters. So how do we drive that in a way that brings everyone along, doesn't create two different groups, but still leads to good impact in the built environment?
Yeah, I was just thinking about, I feel like there's so many tools out there that we're all utilizing. Like maybe we need to talk more about what we're using and like, I don't know, just see the overlaps. Because I think even in like the last 2 years or so, there's been like Epic tool. I think MBBJ just came out with a sort of holistic carbon reduction tool. It's like there's all these tools out there. I'm wondering if like maybe we started the conversation earlier. There's probably a lot of overlap between tools and like even doing like very early analyses, like very holistically for a carbon reduction for a project. So I don't know, just throwing that out there.
Yeah, and I know in our experience, sometimes, we get on projects and, we might be the only team member that is on one of these commitments. And I'm sure that everybody in this panel has probably had that same experience, and there's a level of knowledge sharing and education that needs to happen. And so, perfect world, every single team member is committed and we're all on the same page, and everyone knows, the secret sauce on how to make the, the building as low impact as possible. But I think the real secret is just making sure that everyone is open, transparent, sharing information, and bringing those experiences from other projects to your new ones, and really keeping everybody on the same page. I think we've really been kind of working in silos for a little bit as everyone's really started to understand the impact of their respective systems. And so I personally would love to see, life cycle assessments start to more comprehensively take all of this into account, because I feel like still we're working a little bit in silos. Some structural engineers do structure, architectural does enclosure. Sometimes that's married, and very rarely is all of that married with operational into a, beautiful result. But there's still a lot of other areas in the industry that aren't being captured. So I hope that one day we're not all working in separate pieces, that we can all work together and bring all of that into comprehensive results.
And from my understanding and talking to sort of folks at the national level, there is interest in kind of bringing the initiatives together from a practical level and actually having one database versus 3 separate reporting mechanisms and the same metrics, and trying to make it easier from that perspective, because again, ultimately it's the same projects that you're all working on, just from a different perspective.
Well, and yeah, and to be clear, right now, the MEP 2040 does use the AIA DDX platform to do its reporting. Obviously, we want to have our own special thing that's more detailed and gets into the things that we really care about. And maybe that'll get developed. There's opportunities to get that, funding that's available to improve it through grants and things. But yeah, it's because there's 2 things that I think we want out of this data. That's the dream would be first, just, the benchmarking. Are we meeting what we need to get to? The pass fail part, and then just having more data about buildings in general, because like CVEX got mentioned. CVEX has been an amazing part of the building industry to just, go in and be like, hey, how much energy do I think this building's going to use? And immediately, what the priorities are. Like, oh, okay, I'm going to focus on lighting. It lets you kind of bring that analysis really early. We are just barely getting there with embodied carbon, right? We have the Carbon Leadership Forum, LCA data set, which is, embodied carbon CVEX. And you can come in and say like, well, basically, we know it's going to be between these 2 numbers, probably between like 20 and 50 kilograms per square foot or something, and then you can start to, and we probably know it's going to be concrete and steel that are big things, and that lets you like take more action. So I think as these groups build this data, that's the other promise. It's not just about the scorekeeping, it's about then letting us people go farther faster.
Yeah, thanks, Ante. So just to clarify, so the AIA has a database called DDX that's been the repository for this information for a long time. The required, EUI operational emissions is the minimum, and then there's a few other data points that I think are optional. And so MEP 2040 is now reporting into that, with the exception of refrigerants, I think, or maybe that's going to be added to the database. That's sort of one of the add-ons. And then Jessica, I know SE 2050 has its own database. I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about that one, and then we'll turn it over to some of the questions in the chat.
Yeah, I know that we're doing some updates on the database right now, and I wish that I had a bit more information because I'm not in that subgroup on the committee, but yeah, essentially we're reporting on, all of the structural pertinent, factors of the project. And I'm probably preaching to the choir when we say, there's just a lot of different ways to report the data, depending on the software that you're using and what stages and what the scope is. And so I think we're at SE 2050, we're about to turn a page, and hopefully that page is leading us to a collective pathway that we can bring all this data together. But that's all I can share right now.
Well, that is relevant to the first question that came in from Amanda, who's curious to learn more about the tools, both for operational and embodied carbon, that you're using early in design to evaluate performance.
Sure. So like Kelly mentioned, there is a ton of tools out there. It's almost overwhelming and hard to understand where to start. I guess I very much appreciate EPIC and NBBJ and a lot of those early phase carbon measurement tools. We're also using some form of spreadsheets to help transfer material takeoffs to effective environmental impact values. It's difficult on the structural side whenever we have early design conversations. We don't usually have like a Revit model of sorts to use some of those more complex software. So whenever we do want to get a bit more detailed than some of the estimation calculators, we work to really compare different systems and use those Excel tools. And then if we want to get further into the weeds, we can throw those material values into One-Click LCA, which is the software that we typically gravitate towards. But it's always fun coordinating with our peers, with our architects and our MEP engineers to marry all this data. So curious what you, Kelly, and Ante are using, your approach.
Yeah, I can jump in. I think embodied carbon side, similar sort of early tools, like you were saying, Jessica. And then I think when we have like a more built out Revit model that has structure and finishes and all that good stuff, we've been using Tally for Revit, which has been pretty nice. And then I think Tally for Revit, you can also like export your information into EC3, so the embodied carbon and construction calculator that came out of Building Transparency and Carbon Leadership Forum folks. So that's been a nice workflow for us. So sort of looking at the embodied carbon, maybe more at like a hotspots. This is where the big impact areas are in Tally, and then getting into more detail in EC3 and looking at particular environmental product declarations. So we've definitely been exploring that more, and it feels like with each project we're learning a little bit more each time. And then I guess on the operational carbon / energy side, we've been also exploring like COTE tool for sure. So we're looking at ways that we can do really early energy modeling. So yeah, that's been a nice way to learn for sure. And then I think COTE tool maybe eventually leads to a more built out energy model that either the engineering folks take on, or sometimes that's maybe where the energy modeling stops for certain projects. But yeah, it's always the goal to take the energy model and sort of build it out to the end.
Yeah, at GluMac, our main energy modeling tool is IES virtual environments, which is a very powerful tool. And to make it work fast, we have workflows to make it work fast and simple at the earliest stage. And then also lots of spreadsheets. But both Kelly, Jessica, something that you hit on is the data that supports some of this analysis. So we have lots of great data on energy use and utility emissions and all these things that in the operational energy side, refrigerant, maybe the refrigerant leakage documentation is amazing. I think the one thing that we're in the MEP side jealous of for architecture and structure is the embodied carbon data is much more robust for things like concrete, steel, glass, insulation. And then when we look at the materials that we're specifying and installing, whether that's ducts, air handling equipment, light fixtures, it's not as transparent and not as direct. And so that's one of the things that MEP 2040 is trying to change is to have a unified industry group advocating so we can get that kind of data and help have some choices, like have what do we want to specify to lower the impact of all the thousands of pounds of duct work that we put into buildings. Because you can't go into EC3 and find that.
How's that working, Ante? Are you able to influence the supply chain, or what's the response?
I think there has been some positive movements. So I would say that there's on the mechanical side, there's this UK standard called CIV-CTM 65 for doing essentially non-EPD calculations of embodied carbon. So a lighter lift for manufacturers. It's really driven by just disclosing the quantities of materials that go into your item. And there's definitely some momentum to get that available in the United States. So I think it's getting better. But many of these manufacturers, they make 1,000 different products and they have a hard time understanding what to prioritize, and then maybe people aren't asking enough for them. So that's the value, is to, as an industry, kind of say, hey, this is what we really want to know about.
Well, if folks have other questions, please put them in the chat. I have a handful of other ones. So I'm curious. You sort of referenced it at the beginning, but it would be great to talk a little bit more, if you have the history, about what it was like to kind of convince your firms to sign on. And I think a lot of the folks, we talked to in the industry are like, oh yeah, firm's been talking about it. We're not quite ready to take the leap. What was that process like, talking to firm leadership and actually getting over that threshold of thinking about it to being a signatory?
So I can go first. I guess at DCI, we've always really been committed to sustainability and haven't really, like I mentioned this before, understood the gravity of our impacts and really understood what we can really do to move the needle. We've been a part of some living building challenge projects, tons of LEED certifications, but haven't really felt like we've been able to have much of a hand in a lot of that work. And so whenever this commitment came to our attention, it was really exciting. And then it was also really scary. Like I mentioned, we had 20 at the time, we had 20 plus offices, and we had we had 13 offices and we had like 300 employees. So it was still a large group, and we wanted to really make sure that we understood every requirement that was going to be laid out, because we did not want to go down this path and not be able to fulfill our promises. So it did take a little bit of time to just think about staffing and how exactly we would meet these requirements with the software that's available on the market and available to us as practitioners. So I think once we were able to see, like, yes, we can make this happen. We with the resources that we have available now, let's do it. It was pretty easy, but just, yeah, it was very difficult to try to explain to a group of 6 executive management team members that don't know what embodied carbon means, does not know what a life cycle assessment is. We really had to educate them to feel comfortable enough to do this. So that was our journey. And I do want to point out, we've been around for 30 years. And so all of this is very new to a lot of those people in the executive management team that may have started the company. They weren't aware of this kind of coming up. And so it's been very rewarding to come back in and revitalize and move towards a more sustainable path.
I feel like I have to give some credit to the people in senior management, our chief sustainability strategist Nicole Isle, our building science group director Chris Lowen, who made the case to our president that this was directly in line with GluMac's values, and so that part was, as I said, relatively straightforward. It was definitely the fastest part. And I think maybe the difference is, at GluMac we've designed living buildings, and when your president has walked into net zero energy building and likes to brag about it, it makes it a lot easier to make that your goal, right? And when they see the value of being a leader in that field, really helps.
Yeah, same. I was just thinking about the folks at OPSIS, maybe before I started, who really pushed signing on to the 2030 commitment at OPSIS. So yeah, kudos to all of them, especially Heather DeGrella, who's the sustainability director here. Like maybe don't have all the info about like how exactly that process went, but I think similarly to Ante, the firm leadership was very, I think one of the core values of OPSIS since the very beginning has been sustainability, and that has grown so much over the years. And I think at that time when we signed up about 10 years ago now, it was like, we're ready to do this. Maybe we don't know 100% the how yet, how we're gonna do reporting for all of our projects. But yeah, just pushing towards that. And then I think knowing that there's like this larger community out there to support you after you sign on is like always reassuring, because I feel like I need to know what I'm getting into before I sign up to anything. So yeah, happy to share all the resources. I think in addition to Carbon Leadership Forum, there's like a great AIA working group that's called, I think, Basecamp, that is sort of like an online forum that's really helpful to ask like all your questions about what 2030 reporting is, to like how to do baselines, which is like very confusing, and like all that good stuff.
So yeah, in my experience working with some of the firms that are signatories, there's a mix of folks who, Jessica, like you said, they want to know exactly how it's going to work and what they're signing on to, and like, have the clear path laid out. And then there's others that are like, we believe in this, we want to do it, they sign on, but then there is that barrier to like, okay, we don't have the capacity, we don't know how to deliver. So one of the questions for Amanda here is, what kind of education initiatives have you rolled out? So what are some of the things that you've done to, once you signed on, like sort of lift all boats and bring everyone sort of up to a similar level of understanding and familiarity with what it takes to do this kind of analysis and reporting?
So we've tried a few things, and like I mentioned earlier, we have our yearly embodied carbon presentation that we give. We're very much trying to integrate it into our onboarding processes. And so we want every single engineer that's hired, and frankly, any employee at DCI, to really understand the gravity of the work that we're doing, and what embodied carbon really means from a structural standpoint, as well as with the rest of the industry. And so there's that base level of information of education that we want to implement, and then there's the other further learning paths that need to take place, and so the engineers understand more specifics about concrete, steel, wood, and how to use those materials to their benefit, as well as how to communicate with the rest of the team members, and really get the most thoughtful design carried out to the end. And so we initially had company-wide classes where we were doing recordings of an hour, and that was very difficult because no one would come back and watch those. So we have like a library of some recordings that we've done that we reference for engineers, but we're going to move more towards a learning module pathway. And so people can go and learn tidbits of information on their projects as they get more into concrete or steel. It's sometimes overwhelming to dump all of the information at once. And so trying to figure out how to better get engineers to digest that, and then just really understanding their their footprint, essentially. Like I was mentioning earlier, compared to an average consumer, it's staggering to understand how much, influence a building designer really has. And so once we kind of put all of those pieces together, it's really exciting because you can just start to see the engineers' gears turn and they start making these decisions for themselves. And I think that's the biggest win. We don't want to keep, reminding them, hey, you need to do this, hey, you need to do this. We want it to be a part of their standard practice and something that they care enough to implement. So.
Well said.
Yeah, I'll say, Jessica, like, so on our side, one of the big issues is just getting heat pump technology deployed, whether that's for like space conditioning or water heating, and then understanding the associated electrical infrastructure impacts of that. And so we went down something similar. We did a couple, regionally developed webinars that were recorded to share both the why, about why decarbonization is important, and then the how, getting the real practical lessons learned, the rules of thumb that need to change, things like that. So we did those, we recorded them, we built a library of resources, and now we're using those. That's where we try to point people to. And so maybe not going into the nitty gritty of what's our EUI for next year that we have to hit, under the 2030 ratchets, but more just like, this is the technology that needs to get out there. It needs to work well. We need to avoid the negative refrigerant impacts, and just focusing on that how to push that out to our teams.
Yeah, I would add, I think our sustainability action plan is getting updated right now. It feels like every time we update it, there's like more to add for sure. But we've been trying to do like onboarding, utilizing our SAP, so that folks new to OPSIS sort of know what our goals are across carbon reduction, but then also other areas like what a healthy building is, making a site that's both supports biodiversity, all the things. So that's been really helpful. And then our green team internally, we sort of had a focus group on sustainability. We've been sort of, I guess, released like a lunch and learn series, maybe similar to Jessica, what you were saying about, yeah, just trying to disperse the information, because there's like so many updates and so many new things that's even happened in the last 5 years since we've updated it previously. So just finding ways to, yeah, just get the information out there to all the folks who need it. So.
That's great. There's a comment in the chat from Robert that the AIA 2030 sustainability action plans are available for all signatories. I think the SE 2050 ones are actually publicly available once someone submits it. And then what about the MEP 2040? Do you know, Ante, if those are available to other signatories?
That's a great question. Many of them are directly available from the firms themselves, is how I've gotten them.
Okay.
And they're great. They've been, Borough Happold has some public information on how they crafted theirs, which is really helpful for anyone trying to get started.
Yeah, so that's great. So that's a resource many of you could go out and look at now and look at examples of how, in detail firms are planning to address the requirements of these commitments. So I will wrap us up unless there's any other burning questions. It's been a little quiet in the chat, but I guess the final thing for each panelist is we ask them for one recommendation to firms considering signing on, and what that would be. Top rec.
I can go first. I think I kind of said it already. I think my top recommendation was, I think there's a lot of like maybe feelings of being overwhelmed when you see the list of things you need to do to sign on, and like being like, oh no, what exactly does that mean? But yeah, I guess I would just encourage folks, like it feels like such an actionable, impactful step to become a signatory, to just know like there's so much support even within like the local Portland community, and then even to the national scale with like AIA for like how to do reporting, how to put together an SAP, like all the stuff we talked about, as well as like all the forums out there where you can ask the many questions that you have. So, and then also the ETO internship, of course, like so many pathways to be supported. So yeah, just know there's a community out there.
that was going to be my recommendation, is once you make the commitment, participate in the community, because that is really, you know, what helps you. It's not a unique problem you're facing. And also that's for real change. We do have to have this industry-wide collaboration. So definitely get involved with the working groups with MEP 2040. It's very enjoyable.
I guess my advice would be, you know, don't be intimidated, don't be afraid to ask questions, and don't be, I guess, afraid to fail. I mean, that's pretty difficult to say even for myself, because I'm sure we all have that level of fear. But you know, these commitments in this industry is very dedicated to seeing, you know, true growth and decarbonization across all disciplines. And I know from my perspective, it's been incredibly enlightening to be in these groups, because like Ante and Kelly were saying, there's so much resources and there's like so much support. And it makes me so happy that people are, you know, sharing these resources and sharing knowledge. It's not all about who's going to come across the finish line first. It's really important that we're all pushing the industry to develop this knowledge. Otherwise, no one's going to cross the finish line. So yeah, just do your best.
Well, that's great. Well, to that end, Energy Trust hopes this is just the first of ongoing conversations that we can help support and facilitate in the local market, because there's great precedent and great leaders like the three folks we have today. Thank you so much for doing this work and very willing and excited to share and collaborate. So yeah, just a couple bits of wrap up. I'm going to put the link one more time to Energy Trust internship application, which is due next week. So if you're looking for some added capacity to support your firm to deliver on one of these commitments, that is an opportunity. And that's due on July 21st. And then I think the last bit of housekeeping is just, Kriya, were you going to jump in to talk about how, or Ellen, how HSW credits are awarded?
Sure, I'm happy to jump in. I think there was in the registration where you asked for a certificate of attendance. Also your AIA HSW credits, if you have an AIA member number, are reported on your behalf. So if you didn't provide that information in registration, please, I can put my information in here or respond to AIA Oregon. We'll make sure that you get your credit.
Thanks. And so most of all, Kelly, Ante, and Jessica, thank you so much for taking the time to chat about this, and even more significantly for your leadership on these initiatives and moving your firms forward, and ultimately the industry for the national level work you're doing. So thank you to all of you who participated, and feel free to reach out if you have questions about the internship opportunity, and look forward to more discussion soon. Thanks all.
Thank you so much for this. Thank you.
Thank you.